Florence Thompson was the name of the real migrant mother. The following passage examines her life both before and after the famous photograph was taken. The Story of the Migrant Mother by Ben Phelan. As the United States sank into the Great Depression, a photographer named Dorothea Lange turned her attention away from the studio and portrait work during the suffering she was seeing around her. After taking a job as a photographer for the Resettlement Administration, a New Deal agency tasked with helping poor families relocate, Lange one day found herself in Napomo, California, at a campsite full of out of work pea pickers. The crop had been destroyed by freezing rain. There was nothing to pick. Lang approached one of the idle pickers, a woman sitting in a tent surrounded by her 7 children, and asked if she could photograph them. From Lang's notes, I did not ask her name or her history. She told me her age, that she was 32. She said that she and her children had been living on frozen vegetables from the surrounding fields and birds that the children killed. She had just sold the tires from her car to buy food. Lang took 6 pictures. One of them, Migrant Mother, became the iconic photo of the Depression and one of the most familiar images of the 20th century. With her children cowering behind her for protection, hiding their faces, the migrant mother gazes distractedly into the distance. At the time, the dust blown interior of the United States was full of families like hers, whom poverty had forced off their land and into a life of wandering. Their poverty was total. They had nothing. Where is her husband, the children's father? She is on her own. There is no help, no protection, and nothing over the horizon but work, want, and more wandering. Her worried, vacant expression seems to communicate that we, at our end of history, already know things were not going to get better for a long, long time. There are few images as deeply ingrained in the national consciousness as Migrant Mother. Yet for decades, no one knew what had become of this woman and her family. No one even knew her name. Lang never asked, and by the time the photo appeared in a local newspaper, the woman and her family had moved on to the next town. Finally, in 1978, a reporter from the Modesto Bee found the migrant mother tracking her down to a trailer park outside Modesto, California. Her name was Florence Owens Thompson. She was 75 years old. Lang had promised Thompson that her name would never be published. Thompson wanted to spare her children the embarrassment, but once she was discovered, she revealed her name and told her story. Thompson was born Florence Leona Christie, a Cherokee, in a teepee in Indian Territory, Oklahoma in 1903. She married at 17, then moved to California for farm and mill work. When she was 28 years old and pregnant with her 6th child, her husband died of tuberculosis. Thereafter, Thompson worked odd jobs of all kinds to keep her children fed. For most of the 1930s, she was an itinerant farmhand, picking whatever was in season. During cotton harvests, as she described in interviews, she would put her babies in bags and carry them along with her as she worked down the rows. She earned 50 cents per 100 pounds picked and says she generally picked around 450, 500 pounds a day. I didn't even weigh 100 pounds. For a, for a while, she and her children lived under a bridge. When Steinbeck wrote in The Grapes of Wrath about those people living under the bridge at Bakersfield, at one time we lived under that bridge. It was the same story. Didn't even have a tent then, just a ratty old quilt. One day in 1936, while driving from Los Angeles to Watsonville, Thompson's car broke down. She managed to get the car towed into the Napomo Pea Pickers camp, had it repaired, and was just about to leave when Dorothea Lange appeared. Thompson was not eager to have her family photographed and exhibited as specimens of poverty, but there were people starving in that camp, one of Thompson's daughters later recalled, and Lang convinced her that the image would educate the public about the plight of hardworking but poor people like herself. Within days, the photo was being published in papers across the country, an instant classic of American photography. In the years to follow, the Thompson family kept their identities to themselves, but the photograph was a continual subject of conversation. It always stayed with her, said Catherine Thompson McIntosh of her mother. She always wanted a better life, you know. Thompson moved to Modesto in 1945 and went to work in a hospital there. She had one of the most famous faces in the United States, yet to keep her family together, she had to work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. I worked in hospitals, Thompson told NBC in 1979. I tended bar, I worked in the field, so I done a little bit of everything to make a living for my kids. Thompson profited nothing from migrant mother. I can't get a penny out of it, she once said, but she wasn't exactly bitter. She had posed for the photo to help others, not herself, yet the disparity between her high profile and low status couldn't help but bother her. Meanwhile,